listening to CaveRadioBroadcasting.com. The words and opinions you are about to hear are of the hosts and do not reflect the management of CaveRadioBroadcasting.com.
Good afternoon, everybody. Today is May 17th, 2018, and I think this is our first, we are now entering the 1940s by broadcasting our first show on video. Wow. So, all right, we got our phones off. We've covered all the... I'm actually nervous for I haven't been nervous doing this show since, the second or third show. I'm kind of feeling nervous right now. Anyway, tonight's show is simply called Q. Part 1. We're going to try and get our arms around what is this phenomena of Q, because this is not just a regular thing anymore, and we're going to talk about why. So today we've got Howard is driving the bus. We've got Jay. We've got Tony and the Daves. And Elijah's behind the scenes. Couple things I'd like to say. First of all, my sister, it's her birthday today. Happy birthday, Nancy.
Happy birthday,
listening.
sis.
Happy birthday, sis.
And a few shout-outs. Number one, AE911truth.org. If you care about finding truth, that is a great place to start. Kelly David, if you're listening, I'm sending you a kiss through a microphone. Facesoftruth.com. The DCD Foundation, Ink on Paper, and eldercarecares.com are an assortment of some of the sponsors we have. So if you're tuning in for the first time, you could call Down the Rabbit Hole an Ephesians 5:11 operation, and I'll let you guys figure out what that is, but you should be able to find it. So I'm going to say this. We've had about 128 shows now?
A couple of years worth, yeah.
This is going to be, I think, the most incredible one we've done. Normally we're talking about things that have happened in history, things that are developing in science, kind of where the world meets the Bible in a sense, because like so many people, until I was about 43 years old, I just thought this was some book of myths. And we're going to get to that. And as usual, no matter what, do your own research. If there's one piece of advice, don't even listen to us, which might sound counterintuitive. But even if we're making a mistake, we don't want you to carry it forward. At the end of the day, these things mean a lot more if you see them with your own eyes. Kind of think of it like this. You have a friend that witnesses a car accident, tells you about it. You might be incentivized to buckle up. But you actually witness a car accident with your own eyes, and you see a body flying out of an ejected car window. I think your incentive is going to increase. Do you understand what I'm saying about
absolutely
having this be visual? So we're getting our arms around a story that is literally unfolding as we speak. So more than ever, I am throwing out disclaimers all over the place to double-check our facts, double-check what you see and what we say. Even though I do believe you can trust us, we're humans, and we have been known to make errors. Don't carry them forward. Look at this with your own eyes. This really won't be the topic of today's show, but you'll find this embedded in all of our shows because all of us came to this realization, I think for all of us, relatively late in life, and that is, and I'm still getting my arms around saying this, but that God is real. His son, Jesus, is exactly who he said he was. And understanding these things your eternal hope, I think, resides on your feelings about that. Well, actually, I would say no, but not no, N-O, but K-N-O-W. If you listen or watch enough of our shows and you do your own research, this is something that can actually be proven. I know we were taught differently, and I went to the same high schools you guys did and our listeners did. I mean, it's the same education system. Went to the same colleges that my friends went to, so I totally understand why that might seem like such a leap. Like I said, I didn't get it till I was 43. So don't feel left behind. If you're still breathing, there is time to figure this out. And without sounding scary, ignore this at your own peril, literally, because what?
Not to sound scary. Go ahead.
Not to sound scary, but we're all going to... No. Because at the end of the day, thanks to the internet, which connects us to every library and newspaper that has ever existed in history, we have access to essentially all human information, which means there are no more secrets anymore. There's just ignorance. So some of you guys know I made a movie a few years back with some of the guys in this room called The Anatomy of a Great Deception, and it was really the first part of a trilogy of how I ended up finding God, and it was by dissecting 9/11. And at the end of the day, none of this is working without the powers above, including Father God, Jesus, and I also want to thank the guardian angels that keep the Illuminati from killing us. And we may find out someday exactly how close we've been to that. But so this is our first stream show, and it's going to be maybe the most shocking show that we've ever done. We're going to talk about a lot of things that are unfolding literally as recently as a few hours ago that I suspect is going to change the course of this country's history. And the things we're going to talk about, if these end up coming to fruition, I can't imagine what could be a bigger story. This is much bigger than 9/11. This is bigger than JFK. What other massive events in American history comes up for you guys? The Depression, World War II. And I think what we're talking about is something that large. There's a lot of people, now I'm partial to the 9/11 truth movement, and I think there are a lot of people that have been hoping for some movement in that area that are going to be very vindicated. It's not a promise, but this chessboard is set up to be knocked over, and we're going to explain how that's happening. So we're going to be here pretty much each week. Tune in. Every week we keep painting the picture. Think of this as like a Seurat painting. It's a pointillism. We add a new dot to the picture. First few dots, you have no idea what you're looking at, but you keep at it, and a picture starts to form. Even if some of the dots you have are black or incorrect, or they're just whites because you haven't found that information, you don't have to have 100% of it filled out in order to see what it is the picture is. Think of it like a jigsaw puzzle. And like a jigsaw puzzle, we've all done them. You dump all the pieces on the board, and the first piece to place usually takes the longest. But when you keep at it, pretty soon you're just picking up pieces, and you know exactly, at least roughly where they go, and maybe even exactly where to click them in. And that's a good metaphor for something that not just happened to the five guys in this room, but to millions upon millions of people across the world, not just the United States. So, one of the slogans of the show is, there are no more secrets, just ignorance. So what ignorance? How do you guys define ignorance?
Well, I think common way is...
what do you think of when you hear someone's ignorant? What's the first thing that comes to mind?
like they lack information.
Well, that actually is not mine. Mine is, I think they're
Dumb.
That's
Mine would be they don't care about the information.
All right. So ignorance, it's not stupidity. It is, although they often go hand in hand. Ignorance is simply to ignore something. So I know literally hundreds of people that care about bringing the truth of 9/11 to the surface. And I know that you guys listening, I know you deal with ignorance in your social circles all the time. And I have a feeling this year you are going to be vindicated. It's not a guarantee, but I've got a very good feeling, and we're going to explain why, because there's some things happening that I've now been at this for 7+ years. There's some things happening that I have never, ever seen. And let's call them, if we're soldiers in a spiritual war, let's call this some serious reinforcements.
For the best Italian
like
fare in Metro
ICBM
Detroit, you've
missiles.
got to try Bella Piatti.
Thanks.
That's a quick plug.
Yeah.
Thank you for our
is anyone else
sponsors.
hungry for pizza right
They
now?
need to
I don't
send
know
us
why
a
I was
check
thinking
for
about
that.
this.
Cha-ching.
All right. Howard is surfing pornography on the internet, and we just picked up a pizza ad. All right. So I want you guys to understand, ignorance is it is a choice. It is a choice. We have the intelligence that God gave us. I don't know if that's a choice, although I do believe the muscle's a brain and you can work it out. We're talking about overcoming ignorance because some of the things we talk about, they're unpleasant, frankly. And on this show particularly, we're going to be talking about some things that even for myself, I did not think I could be surprised anymore. And I've been this way now for several years. But I have been surprised.
Yeah, me too.
Have you? I mean, it's a topic we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
There's a reason Jesus repeatedly, whenever he was asked, whatever the question, like, Jesus, when are you coming back? He wouldn't say when. I mean, he'd get to that later. He'd give us the signs. But what was the first thing he always said?
Well, he was warned against deception.
Do not be deceived. And just so you know, even if you don't believe in the Bible, God, I believe, considers ignorance a sin. And it can be, I don't want to sound melodramatic, but I personally believe catastrophic if that is your game plan in life. And the things we're talking about, frankly, will be something that no one will be able to ignore, I think, in the near future. I believe the first domino may have even fallen as recently as a few hours ago. So one last or maybe a couple more disclaimers is this. If you guys get your information from the 6 o'clock news, I don't even know if you should be listening to this show. And I suggest to turn it off. And not just actually turn off the television, but unplug it. And if you understand why, bless you. But that's another show, and we'll get into that later. The things we're talking about today, this is not about politics. This is not about religion. This is just about the simple truth. What's that? I hear something.
I don't know.
Oh, maybe it's that other room. All right. When it comes to 9/11, even as I was making the first movie, and we've got Anatomy of a Great Deception. The first movie was Anatomy of a Great Deception. The tagline for that movie was essentially, we had several taglines, but How Building 7 Woke Me Up. And I think many of us. And that is the cornerstone of 9/11. Looking into that is going to lead you through a litany of questions that I now can say with total confidence has woken or opened the eyes of millions of people. And even so, part 2 is coming out in 2019, and we're going to be working with architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth Again. The slogan for part 2 is, I guess we could say, it's how they pulled this off. And we're going to have 2 films coming out back-to-back, 2019 and 2020. And part 3 of this trilogy is who did it and why. Now, I never, ever thought we would actually bring the culprits to justice. I really never thought that this could ever possibly happen. And no, if you think the culprits are 19 guys from caves in Afghanistan, you've seen too many cat videos on CNN. That these, what really happened that day is has really fooled. I won't even say the majority anymore. I think now we're at a point now where most of this country does not even believe the official story, and that leads to a rabbit hole. Hence the name of this show. But I've got a feeling that we will not even be able to get the third film out in which we were going to name names. I've got a feeling that that's going to happen before. So why? You guys familiar with QAnon?
As of yesterday.
Well, have you ever heard Tony, for instance,
Yes.
talk about QAnon?
Yeah, I heard him mention it before.
How did you find out about it? You're the first one that ever brought him up to me.
I was. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Now you know.
I thought everybody knew about it. You hear a lot about it, a lot of these channels that we're looking at. different things pop up, and you hear different stories. You know, you watch one video, the next video pops up, the next video pops up, and you start hearing about these characters. So it's Q is a very interesting. I'm very, very curious to hear your guys' side of it tonight, because there's a lot of different things that could be going on. So I'm kind of like wanting to hear all your guys' point of view on it before I start really getting into it. So what do you guys? I mean, your build up here, you got me so ready to go. I can't stand it.
Well, then let's just get into it and quit goofing around.
Yeah, we don't have lawyers yet. Imagine the disclaimers if we actually get a legal team.
So this is a story we're getting our arms around. You know, when you work in this field, and we've all been in it cumulatively 30 years, maybe, if you add up all our time. I know myself, 7 years. And think of a metaphor like this: you go to a foreign country that you've never been to. You get off the plane. You're dealing now with a new currency. And there's guys at the airport, and you have no idea. They're willing to change American money for, the local country's money. And for all you know, you're getting monopoly money. But by the end of the first week, you start to know, okay, this these bills are worth this much. I can buy a beer at this bar for 2 of these. You start to get an idea. Now, you keep taking that further to living in the country. You're certainly, it would be difficult, not impossible, for a counterfeit bill to circulate among us. Certainly it's happened. There are counterfeit bills in circulation now. And if you go as far as to be a counterfeit expert, you can get to the point where you can look at what looks like 2 identical bills, but the counterfeit expert will know almost immediately. He'll know the little signs to look for to be able to, this one is not. You understand?
Yeah, that's actually 100%
you get into this
true.
deep enough, and your awareness will, maybe with a little help from upstairs, but your awareness can get to that level. And so we are bringing together that kind of background to put this particular show today out. So one of the things we've been talking about this show, and I'm going to use some words that could shock people. Things that they're just outside of our perception of normality. Now, we've been in this so long that, like I said, there's not much that surprises us anymore, but I have been surprised, literally, more than I ever even thought possible. And I have right now more hope than ever for the outcome of things that are happening here on Earth, literally. So one of the premises you'll get on this show, and this is the first layer, and a lot of people lose this, and I'm not going to sugarcoat anything for you. I'm just going to come out and say it. From the first time I ever heard it, it would take me almost 9 months to circle back and realize that the first people talking about these types of things knew what they were talking about. I couldn't even convince some people in my own household of these things, even though I knew them with a level of certainty that is now at the point where I'd die before I renounced it. Like, I am that certain about it. And I think you guys are all in that same boat at this point, yes?
Yeah, absolutely.
If talking about Jesus Christ, then yeah.
And who his enemy is.
Right.
Who did Jesus Christ come to save us from?
Well, from Satan.
Okay. But is he, I always thought that a mythical creature, obviously not very real.
Well, Looney Tunes did that for all of us, right?
Now, whether Satan
Right.
is real or not, now I happen to absolutely believe he is, people that praise Satan or praise Lucifer, whether you want to hear this or not, they have occupied positions of power in our country since its founding. Doesn't mean we were founded on Satanism, but it certainly has been a warning we've gotten throughout history. It begins with George Washington. Here's something that he said, and actually wrote this to Jabez Brown, who was, I believe, the governor of Rhode Island. This was in 1787. Now, we're going to put all this together for you. But George Washington wrote to him, he said, "Paper money has had the effect in your state that it will always have, to ruin commerce, oppress the honest, and open a door to every species of fraud and injustice." And I don't realize if he knew exactly how right he was. And like I said, that was in a letter to Jabez Brown on January 9th, 1787. You can go look that up in the National Archives. Let's We could pull out so many warnings from history. We could spend all day doing this. I'm going to fly through American history to get us to Trump's warning before he became president. Remember, this is not about politics. From George Washington, we go to Andrew Jackson. Now, cleverly citing the Bible, the same currency powers that Washington was talking about, Andrew Jackson had this to say: "You are a den of vipers. I intend to rout you out, and by the eternal God, I will rout you out. If the people only understood the rank injustice of our money and banking system, there would be a revolution before morning." And Andrew Jackson said this was recorded in the minutes of a meeting with the central bankers at the Philadelphia Committee of Citizens, and this was in February of 1834. And you can find this on pages 4 to 5 of records called Andrew Jackson and the Bank of the United States. It was printed for Stan Henkel's. The book came out in 1928, but the document has been in the historical record since 1834. Abraham Lincoln, the story continues. His quote, this was in 1864. "The money powers prey upon the nation in times of peace and conspire against it in times of adversity. It is more despotic." You guys know what despotic means? Why don't you enlighten us real quick?
You could just replace that with tyrannical.
Tyrannical, dictator-ish.
Yeah.
Okay. "The money powers prey upon the nation in times of peace and conspire against it in times of adversity, is more despotic than a monarch, more insolent than autocracy, and more selfish than a bureaucracy. It denounces as public enemies all who question its methods or throw light upon its crimes. I have two great enemies, the Southern Army in front of me and the financial institutions in the rear. Of the two, which one do you think he was more afraid of?"
The financial institutions.
Of the two, the one in the rear, the financial institutions, is the greatest enemy. And that was written in a letter to William Elkin on November 21st, 1864, by Abraham Lincoln. These are excerpts out of the 401 book, which I'm not mentioning right now. Fast forward, Woodrow Wilson. Now, this quote actually appeared in The Anatomy of the Great Deception. And I'm trying to tie a picture here that what we're up against is generational. This, let's call this amoeba-like group. Some people call them the Illuminati or the establishment. What does Q call them? Does he have a name for them? Do we know?
Don't know.
It's pretty much the establishment.
Evil, is what he calls them. And the level of evil it's mind-boggling, but we're going to get to that. So Woodrow Wilson, he wrote this in 1913. This was in his book, The New Freedom. Now, you got to understand, he wrote this on the eve of his presidency, actually. But at this point, he's already in circles of power. And you've got to almost imagine what he could be talking about and understand that what he's talking about is the same thing Washington was talking about, Jackson, Lincoln. And I could cite every president, professors, scholars, philosophers, military men throughout history. We've got 2,000 quotes in the 401 book, all coming to this conclusion. Woodrow Wilson said this: "Since I entered politics, I've chiefly had men's views confided to me privately. Some of the biggest men in the U.S. in the field of commerce and manufacturing are afraid of somebody, are afraid of something. They know that there is a power somewhere so organized, so subtle, so watchful, so interlocked, so complete, so pervasive, that they had better not speak above their breath when they speak in condemnation of it." What could he be talking about? Because when we think of government, what do you think of the government when the government runs something? What's the first thing that comes to your mind? They're messy, sloppy,
disaster. Yeah,
they screw everything up. I'm going to make an argument that
you think the government is the high level. If you talk to most people, you'd say, they would say that the president is the high level. He's the decision maker. He's the one that...
He's like the top of the pyramid.
He's the top of the pyramid is what most people will think when it comes to government. But what he's saying there is that's not true. There's a power
there
above
is
that.
Something that the most powerful men in the United States in Woodrow Wilson's day were so afraid of that they wouldn't condemn it unless they were whispering to a buddy. Let's flash forward. J. Edgar Hoover. Don't think it's an accident that when we think of J. Edgar Hoover, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Cross-dresser, right?
Yep.
We discount him.
I was thinking Archie Bunker. But
even
anyway.
though he was the longest-serving director of the FBI through 1972, I believe, probably knew more about the inner workings of this country maybe than any man at any given time. He had this to say, which I think is really, really interesting. Where are you, J. Edgar? Here it is. From the top of a mountain nearly 2,000 years ago, Christ warned mankind against being duped by the very menace which we face today. He said, "Beware of false prophets which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravening wolves." He wrote this in December 1957. He would be FBI director for another 15 years. Ted Gunderson. You guys know Ted Gunderson. This might be the first name that is not totally familiar to this audience. Ted Gunderson at one point was in line to become the director of the FBI. He was one of the final potential appointees. And I want to say this was under Clinton or Bush? Old Bush. Nonetheless, he at one time was in charge of the Los Angeles field office. He had 700 agents below him. The amount of information he had access to is frankly pretty staggering. Now, he left the FBI to try and expose, again, the very thing we're going to be talking about today. Here was his comment. He calls it this evil element. We've thrown out some names. Some people call it the Illuminati, the elite, the powers that be, the 1%. Jesus Christ referred to this group as the synagogue of Satan. We're not going to be able to address how we followed what Jesus Christ had to say about this group of people through history. We were just picking this up at the beginning of our country, but this was something that was going on long before this country was even established.
It was 79.
What's that?
Gunderson was interviewed in 79, so that would have been Carter.
Okay.
Wow.
Under Carter. Here's what he had to say. Now, he said this in 2002. He's no longer with us, by the way. Here's what he had to say. This evil element has infiltrated virtually every level of society. It's in the government. They've gone out of their way, of course, to infiltrate the city, county, state, and federal government. It's in the banking system, in the courts. It's in the prosecutors, the attorneys, the doctors. It's mind-boggling. It's unbelievable. Pretty crazy for a man who was almost the director of the FBI to be so shocked about something he saw. And what was it that he saw? I mean, do you guys understand when he resigned from the FBI, what he spent the rest of his life doing? You guys know, right?
I think so.
He was exposing things.
He was exposing a satanic element in this world. Because right now, police stations, policemen are trained to never reveal if a crime is a satanic crime. Now, they're young and impressionable, and when your higher up tells you, you do it. And then that generation of police officers become old police officers, and then they train the new guys, and they just pass the information down without really thinking about it. These are all little ways that this has sort of been kept hush-hush from the world.
That was corroborated, too, by Russ Dizdar and others.
Yeah, great point. I mean, Russ Dizdar was a police chaplain, and he himself started to see, holy cow, there are so many murders that are these satanic ritual murders, but that information is never released to the public, and the numbers are staggering. Ted Gunderson figured this out. And
well, he was on a case. I believe that's how
Jonathan
he got
Gosh case, or was it a different
the
case?
doctor. He was a military doctor that I believe
and
was he.
Yeah, and his
he
family
got brought into
was,
the case, and he basically said, I'm gonna investigate this, but if I find out that this doctor killed his wife, is what it was about, I believe, then I'm out. And then he was presenting this to an audience years later, and he said, I'm still on the case. So I think that's how he got involved in the satanic part of it. That's what he was investigating that case and found satanic ties to all this.
More than just a tie or two. What he saw was so overwhelming that he dumped his pension, his career at the FBI willingly to go speak about this. And we all know this. When you're touched by this information, it changes your life. Because when you know something, you know it. And you can't, once you know it, you can't go back to your regular life. I tried many, many times. He is, now this is now 2002. Now he's running up against the very same evil power that Woodrow Wilson was talking about. John F. Kennedy, famous speech. We probably all know this one. For we are opposed around the... No, and he was not speaking about the Russians, and I'm not going to take this show to prove it. You should know it just by reading it. But here was his quote. This was John F. Kennedy, and he said this in 1961. This was a speech called The President and the Press. And he said, for we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation. This is a president talking. On intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. This is not the Russians. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. It conducts the Cold War, in short, with a wartime discipline. A wartime discipline no democracy would ever hope or wish to match. Think about that one, too. Now, this organization that he tried to out ultimately executed him. And no, it was not Lee Harvey Oswald. And if you're there, you got to turn this off. Moving on. Myron Fagan, someone else you guys may or may not have heard of, movie director. And it's funny how the art world touches this so often. It's not an accident that Harvey Weinstein, he's just the tip of the iceberg. Just today, I read a press release that there's a documentary coming out on Whitney Houston's life, approved by her family. She was a sex abuse victim her whole life. Because this is chronic. We're talking, this is the people that we see on TV every day. There are so much things going on behind the scenes that are we've been trying to reveal them. Q, who we're going to be talking about today, is revealing them, and he's doing it from inside of the White House. And we're going to show how we know that. Myron Fagan said this. Now, he called this a satanic conspiracy. And he says, this was in a 1967 vinyl recording, which you can go online and find. You can listen to it in his own voice. The masterminds behind this great conspiracy have absolute control of all our mass communication media, especially television, the radio, the press, and Hollywood. Now, he had seen something at the, what was the summit with Roosevelt and Stalin, the Yalta Conference? Yeah. He saw essentially documents that showed that World War II was pre-planned, and it was part of a plan to bring the world into a one-world government. A plan that Albert Pike wrote about in 1871 when he wrote a letter meant for Giuseppe Mazzini. Albert Pike, a general in the Confederate Army. General. This is a high-level guy. Sends a message via courier to his Freemasonic equivalent in Italy. And you know how that letter came into the public domain?
I do.
Struck by lightning.
Hey.
The writer was struck by lightning. Now, of course, remember, this cabal has complete control of our media. So if you've ever gone as far as to even know who Albert Pike is, you, I'm sure, will have read something like, oh, they debunked that, they debunked this. Very impossible to prove a negative, yet they say it so certainly. Now, we do know that that letter was on public display in the British Museum. There's, again, that was removed and taken out because that letter discussed the fact. Now, this is in 1871. That letter said 3 world wars need to happen. The first one is to remove the czars from Russia, which is exactly what happened. Enter communism. World War II was to create a scenario that would allow the establishment of the State of Israel. Holocaust goes down. Hitler, if you ask me, was a run-up, a test run for an Antichrist archetype done on one nation. But you see how well it worked there and the technology they have now. And you can, if your eyes are open, you can see this happening today. Where was I going with this?
Then
Albert Pike. Oh, and then from 1871. Now, this letter is with total certainty in the recorded in books that are published as early as 1926, but it was in the London Museum before World War I. Of course, these guys would have had something like that removed, and a bunch of stories afterward to say, "Oh, it never existed." What's interesting, though, even if he wrote it in 1926, he talks about a third world war that'll be in the Middle East, that'll be between a nation yet to be born, Israel, and Islam. And this will bring in the reign of the Antichrist. This is very biblical now. So we've tried to piece this together up through current day. Now, there's a quote in the 401 book that's from Donald Trump while he was campaigning. And I'm going to condense it a little bit. But here, this is from October 13th, 2016, from a PBS NewsHour video. And the quote goes like this. "The corporate media is no longer involved in journalism. Our system is rigged. The establishment has engaged in a massive cover-up of widespread criminal activity. This is a struggle for the survival of our nation. This is a crossroads in the history of our civilization." Pretty grandiose words, right? I mean, he's just running for president. He's going to be, what, the 40, what would he have now? 49, 50, where are we?
4.
Okay. So
45.
45th, yeah, that's right.
one of the things that was hard for me to understand is, one, I'd never read the Bible or studied it. I mean, it's in every person's home, but I was sure I knew what was in it because everyone says it's a book of myths. But when you actually get in there and start to realize that all of history was predicted before it happened, you realize that the inspiration behind what was written had to come from someone that can see into the future, or maybe has been there. I don't ask me how these things work, but too many details. And I'm not just talking about the regathering of Israel, which happened. That was a prediction made by Jesus Christ 2,000 years ago. Incredible prediction by itself. But there's 100 details that go with that prediction. All of them have come true. And they said that once that happens, we're now in the end times. Now, whether that's 1 year from now or 24 years, who knows? But I do know this. God works in sevens. And it's been 70 years as of 3 days ago since Israel was reestablished. And for those of us who, at one time, like me, thought, well, the Illuminati was behind the reestablishment of Israel, which absolutely they were. It was after, or as World War II is heating up, this Balfour declarations from World War I. They decided to assign a plot of land for this displaced people, the Jews. It ends up becoming a reality on May 14th of 1948.
The Rothschilds were behind that with the leadership with not Winston Churchill, but Chamberlain, wasn't it? Neville Chamberlain?
Well, he was right before Churchill.
Yeah, I think
So
they
that
had
would
an
make
agreement,
sense.
a signed letter stating that, about creating that.
So God does things in sevens. And this applies whether it's in your personal life. You guys all know what happened in my personal life and how something incredible changed on the 7-year anniversary of the day I started looking into 9/11, which was February 14th, 2011. And something incredible, which is not for this show, happened on February 14th, 2018, that, if you ask me, is supernatural. All right, so why is this Q thing the biggest story in history. A couple personal points of this is, for the first time since I've been in this business, I feel like there's the potential of a bright future in the world, at least for a time. We're going to talk about things that are huge. We're talking about revolution. Maybe bloodless, maybe not. Don't be scared by that word. Even Thomas Jefferson himself said we really should have a revolution every 25 years. And we'll do our best to explain why. There are currently an astounding number of what are called sealed indictments. Now, typically, in an average period of time throughout history, there would be about 1,000 sealed indictments. Now, do you guys know what is meant by a sealed indictment?
Explain.
Okay, go ahead. No, go ahead.
It is an indictment that is kept private, out of public view.
It's almost like classified.
For a time. Eventually, essentially all indictments, unless it's covered under national security, becomes public information. Do you guys know how many sealed indictments there are currently right now in the United States?
20-something thousand?
28,000 as of at least a few days ago. And this has been happening during the Trump regime. That means that 28,000 people are recorded somewhere. Some of them, I believe, would have been visited by the FBI. Some of them might have been arrested and out on bail.
Some of them might even be in the FBI to begin with.
Well, that's exactly, not might. Absolutely. One of the things that Ted Gunderson focused on, which, every year, we had a show on this once. How many children go missing every year? And like I said, people, we're going to be talking about some things. I'm a father. These are some things that, frankly, are hard to talk about. But in the United States alone, 800,000 kids go missing every year. In my lifetime, that's 40 million people. It's a classroom a day in every state.
Yeah, we broke this down on a previous show where I think the number's more like 500,000, but that includes runaways, repeat offenders, too. And according to the Center for Missing and Exploited Children, the actual number, which is no less staggering, is upwards of 250,000 a year from the United States. It's just the U.S. Go really missing, like gone.
Now,
missing.
Q's going to address this. Now, we have been theorizing, not even so much theory. I mean, there are a lot of people that see things they're not supposed to see, and then they come out and talk about them, and the next thing you know, they're airplane crashes. This kind of thing happens all the time. This is an incredible amount of people. Yet, if I come home and turn on the news, I guarantee you that story will never be covered. Ted Gunderson couldn't even get that information out to the world. But I'll tell you this. I'll bet you there'll be a cat video on today. Or I'll bet you someone has a diet segment on. Or the latest fashion trends. But what's really going on in this world, it's very hush-hush. Makes our job that much harder, because once you wake up to this, you want to tell everyone. But there's a level of brainwashing going on.
Yeah, that was for me the first thing. Like when I started to hear about things like this, everything that's going on, my question is, well, why are you telling me this, but the news isn't? Like, it just took me so long to realize, like, that's a huge hurdle you got to jump over.
I don't want to go into the details, and some of them are, frankly, disgusting. But I'm going to let Q address it, because he's going to do a much better job than I could. So, my opinion, as an observer, I'm not instigating anything. This is just an observation. Whether you realize it or not, this nation is inches away from a civil war. Does this surprise you guys?
It does not surprise me.
No, not at all.
I said this probably a couple of years ago. You could see it coming.
Now, from my perspective, this is a war of good versus evil, literally God versus Satan, which is very interesting because Q, from inside the White House, uses those exact same words. And that is one of the biggest changes that this finally hit me, that there is an element inside the White House that now for once cares about the real truth of this world. Now, Q is a mechanism that is being used. By who? That's a very good question. We have a profile of Q. We're going to put that together. Q himself said he is going to reveal himself in 6 months from about today. Like this year, by the end of this year, we're going to know who this is.
Now, I would say allegedly Q is in the White House, just because maybe you're more
for me,
into
it's beyond allegedly.
That's something I think we should get into.
We're going to get into that, but just a few things. He has access to Air Force One. He's with the president. He's behind the camera. He'll tweet out a picture of Air Force One while they're in the air, going, so if you don't think I'm in the White House, figure this out. He's got pictures from the Oval Office or one hell of a studio that looks just like it. And he knows things that no regular human could know. You could only know this if you have access to the highest levels of global intelligence. So this is somewhat of a game changer. Now, the mainstream media, which, no coincidence, is they will spend all day talking about how some staffer of Trump insulted John McCain, referencing that his vote doesn't matter anymore because he's going to die soon. That, and everyone will think Trump is just this horrible person. Whatever they can grasp onto is what the mainstream media will tell you. But they won't mention Q. But they're going to. And when this becomes public, which I suspect will be this year, this world will be flipped completely on its head. So Q, what do we know about Q? What is Q? You've been asking about that.
Yes,
we need
yes.
a profile. All right. This is a work in progress here. Here are some things that we know. Someone or a group, could be a man or a woman, posted something on a internet channel called 4chan on October 29th, 2017. It was the first post by this Q character. And I think the title of that first post was Open Your Eyes. So he's only been on the scene for 6 months, 6.5 months. As of May 15th, he had put up 1,375 posts. This is about 6 or 7 per day. These posts, in some cases, are a little bit cryptic. And I totally understand why they're cryptic, or more typically, in the version of leading questions. And I suspect that is to get around national security laws. Now, the beauty of, and I personally, I see God at work here. But for him to expose the truth without breaking the law is the kind of thing God would absolutely be behind, if you understand.
Absolutely.
Well, back up one second about the breaking the law. Now, from all these different whistleblowers, that's one question that people always bring up. Well, if this was going on, why aren't these people talking about it? What people have to realize that listening now is that all of these people, and you hear this from the Kevin Ships and all these different...
Kevin Ship, ex-CIA.
Yeah, all these different people will explain to you that these people all have signed documents, non-disclosures, that any of this stuff that gets out, it's federal prison.
Look, I'm friends with a former CIA asset, Susan Lindauer. She was the second person imprisoned under the Patriot Act. Why? Because she knew 9/11 was coming. Our whole intelligence community knew it was coming. She tried to talk about it, and she was thrown in prison for a year. And then, of course, because there's no case, the case was thrown out, and the public record said because she was mentally unfit to stand trial, which is total BS because she is an incredibly sharp person. I consider her a friend of mine. She was in The Anatomy of a Great Deception. And she's not the only whistleblower. There's hundreds of whistleblowers, because that's, Tony, something people say, well, where are all the whistleblowers? They're all over the place. But guess what? Anderson Cooper's not interviewing them, because Anderson Cooper is not here to tell you the truth, and he's a metaphor for all mainstream media. He's here to prevent you from seeing the truth. That is one of the hardest things to get over about our country. It took me a while. I mean, it took me months to figure that out. And it's scary. I mean, you start to head into scary territory. So Q, I'm just going to call him Q. He's also known as QAnon, the Q Anonymous. Now, what's really interesting, highest level of intelligence. You know what level that is?
17?
Level 17. That's the presidential level. Q is the 17th letter of the alphabet. Could mean something, maybe not. Level 17 belongs to the president. Whoever this is has access to all. This is global intelligence. We're going to throw out some examples that go to the Vatican, that go inside of our government, that is beyond borders. And we're going to talk to you about some incredible incidents that you can go look up online. Now, your newscasters will not tell you about this yet. But there's going to be a day where they either are going to have to talk about it or they're going to literally be, I believe, arrested. And
Right,
we're
going to be talking about them.
I think.
Or the news is going to be talking about them.
All right. So I put out a little teaser to some groups I'm in about 9/11 truth. Because Donald Trump had said, Donald Trump knows 9/11 was an inside job. All right. He said this publicly long before he announced his presidency. And he made a promise to the 9/11 truth community that we're going to get to the bottom of this. And he's been pretty silent about it since then. And I absolutely understand why. You see, the same thing that was woven into all the quotes we gave throughout history, this country right now, it has a cancer. It's in every part of this country's operation. And think of it like a real cancer operation. You can't, if your cancer has metastasized and it's all over your body, you can't just pull out the lump in your leg and you're going to be fine. It'll grow back immediately. What you need to do is you got to prep 10 different surgeons with different specialties, get all the equipment ready, get the anesthetic ready, patient gets laid down, they go in, they carve it all out simultaneously, and hopefully the body heals again. That's very much what we see going on. I'm not going to deny or verify that I have talked to insiders in the FBI or in the Department of Justice. I'm going to leave it at that cryptically. But I'm going to keep talking after I made that comment specifically. There are 28,000 sealed indictments right now. So assume that this conspiracy is a real thing. Assume Woodrow Wilson was not bullshitting us. Assume Kennedy knew what he was talking about. Assume Ted Gunderson was telling the truth. If this thing is that pervasive, how do you beat it? Well, what do you normally do in an investigation like this? You indict somebody. Now, there are special rules if you're indicted and work for the government. It's not like McDonald's and they fire you. When you're indicted, you stay at your job. And you've got a choice. Because the choice is essentially this. You're effed, Mr. Indictee, but if you work with us and tell us who you were working with inside of your organizations, you'll be less effed. Or, if you don't help us, you will be completely effed. Now, to get to the bottom of 28,000 indictments, this takes time. Now, when you see people like Hillary Clinton wearing an ankle monitor, maybe it's a doctored photo, but there is not a shred of doubt in my mind that the crimes that she is behind are so heinous that they literally, that is a protection of its secret, because it's so hard to believe that it could even exist that you discount it before we get off the ground. So right now there have never been more indictments sealed in the history of the United States, ever. Now Q keeps saying, be patient, this takes time. Now you're going to need to go, audience, go see what those posts are. He makes incredible predictions that no one other than someone that has access to all global intelligence could possibly predict. And we're going to talk about a few of these literally shockers. So, Q. I've never really heard, it's been a long time, maybe since Reagan, Kennedy, and then you start to go back in history and every president would talk about God and Jesus. That kind of stopped happening with Kennedy. Reagan was somewhat of an aberration. And a lot of people think that a coup began in 1963 when Kennedy was assassinated that is continuing to grow and grow. It is like a frog in boiling water. In fact, another FBI whistleblower, Sibel Edmonds, she was an FBI translation specialist. She could see documents coming through that she was translating, and she said, she went to her higher-ups saying, they're going to attack the World Trade Center here at the end of the summer, guys. What are you doing about it? You know, out of the FBI. But now what does she do? She's an activist, and she runs a website called, I think it's called The Boiling Frog, if I'm not mistaken. Very much like Bill Cooper, who was in naval intelligence at one time. If you don't know who Bill Cooper is, look him up. 76 days before 9/11, he said, in fact, what was his quote?
Something about there's going to be something happen at the World Trade Center, and it's going to be blamed on Osama bin Laden, but don't believe it.
Yeah, whatever they're going to do and blame on Osama bin Laden, don't you dare believe it. Now, Bill Cooper knew he was going to die for what he said. He even said, my fate is sealed. Technically, I think Jim Garrison, the lawyer in the John F. Kennedy trial that brought charges against Clay Shaw, I think he was the first quote-unquote conspiracy theorist, which I do not associate anymore with something negative. Now, the public still does, but to me, that just means you're open-minded and you're willing to look at some things that may seem incredible and are hidden by their incredibleness. Okay, Jim Garrison, Bill Cooper, and here's the fate of what happens to most people. And it's no accident at the beginning of the show when we thank God for keeping the Illuminati literally from killing us. Because what happened 6 weeks after 9/11? Bill Cooper was killed on his property by government agents. That's a whole nother show and another story. But it's something I think you should look into if you've got the guts to do it. This is not easy. But this, this country was not founded by wussies. It was founded by ass kickers. And the funny thing is the very power we were escaping in Europe, which wasn't the crown, it was the financial powers behind the crown. And that's why, beginning with George Washington, there has been such urgency placed on never giving away our right to print money, which we did in 1913. And if you want to know about that story, go read a book by G. Edward Griffin, I believe, called The Creature from Jekyll Island. And you will understand how this country was hijacked. And if you want to understand the power in printing money, go to our webpage, genpopmedia.com, and look for a video called Federal Reserve, IRS, Rothschild, I believe. We actually simplify it and break it down so that anyone can understand the power in printing money and why we are completely held hostage right now as a nation. Now, funny thing is in that mini documentary we put out, I actually made a comment that it doesn't matter who the president is, he has no hope. But from what I have seen and what Q is relaying to the rest of the world, the most brilliant plan I have seen, I think, in my entire lifetime is unfolding. And I believe there is actually a chance that the president will be able to fix this. Now, we got to go to a break right now. And when we come back in about, 5-6 minutes, Howard, we're going to pick this up, and we're going to throw down some information that's in the public domain that will have your jaw on the floor. At least if you're like me, you will, because my jaw was on the floor. And we'll be back in a few minutes. All right, we are back, and we're going to pick up the pace here because we got a lot of info to get over, and we've been pussyfooting around too much. So, profile of Q. Here's what we know about Q. I'm not going to be able to explain why we know all these things. It's in just when you start to do your own research, you'll understand this. Here's a few things we know. He's got access, or he. I'm going to say he, but I don't know if it's a male for sure, and it could be a group of people. Access to global intelligence, probably level 17 or higher intelligence. This is coming from inside the White House. He is a Christian. He is able to predict world-impacting events before they happen. He is scaring, excuse me for swearing, but I just got to say it, he is scaring the shit out of the elite, which I don't think is an emotion they've felt
Ever.
And it all began because they were certain Hillary Clinton was going to be the next president. And had she won, it would have been, literally, I think the tribulation would have begun. It would have been the end of the United States. People don't understand how close we came. This is, if you buy into this Russian hacking story, first of all, the Russians can't fill up a stadium filled with people to go see Trump. That is not Russian hacks, by the way. No one counted on Trump winning. I mean, I was even watching Saturday Night Live in the weeks going up to it. I'm just like, this guy probably has. It was like watching Cumberland beat Tennessee when they actually lost 222 to nothing a long time ago, but that's a whole different story. It was one of the greatest upsets I've ever seen, ever. Oh, and by the way, we got a very good friend here today, Tony Schwartz.
What's up, guys?
The host on hiatus of FreedomWorks. Did I get that right?
That's right.
Okay. None of this surprises him, by the way. These anonymous communication, he's a communication agent tied to the President of the United States, who totally understands that the mainstream media cumulatively has more power than the President, because things the President says and does, like these astounding speeches quotes I gave you by prior presidents, they don't get out into the public domain unless you really go looking for them. So he's a communication agent of some sorts, and he is discussing the spiritual war literally being waged from the White House. This is historical. This has not happened. These people that are behind the cryptic quotes throughout history that we went through, for the first time, I do believe, sincerely and truly. Now, there have been some false defectors that amp up some hope, but then, again, if you're an expert at deciphering counterfeit currency, it doesn't take long to figure out if someone is fake or not. I've been trying to prove QAnon is fake. I have not been able to yet. He seems to be honoring national security laws. He communicates through leading questions, and he also uses some very basic cryptology, which on some posts, which I think it gives a certain level of plausible deniability should this ever go in an opposite direction. Interesting. Someone mentioned InfoWars and Alex Jones, and I think Alex Jones may have accidentally revealed his hand, because Alex Jones, well financed, he was out ahead of the story, and the way these people operate, like before they do a 9/11, they will have. It's called, Howard, you're going to love me for this, the Hegelian dialectic. They will actually put a wide variety of stories within a particular range, as long as it's in a range that they're okay with. On the right side, we might have allowed these guys to do, we might have let this happen. On the other side, the official story is completely true. You guys are a bunch of nuts for even questioning it. And they will even put their own, literally, agents in charge of some truth organizations. It's a type of disinformation agent that I've given a name to called pen keepers. So I'm very familiar with the 9/11 thing, obviously, and there are people that, I don't believe this is Richard Cage or Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, FYI, but I've run across this in Facebook groups and things of that nature, where it became very obvious that we're dealing actually with a disinformation agent. He'll say everything true about 9/11. He'll even say, you're right, it was an inside job, blah, 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 we got to take the Bushes down, et cetera, et cetera. But when you start to link 9/11 up to other false flags, then he will suddenly say, you're crazy for thinking that that's related. 9/11 is the biggest thing that's ever happened. And I call that type of disinformation agent a pen keeper, because he keeps us in the 9/11 pen. He doesn't let us wander out and connect some dots.
Can I interrupt for a second? Would you agree that, because you told me this a long time ago about the disinformation. If you figure out if this is actually a thing going on as far as what we're proposing here, all these things that we see going on around in the world, that there is a lot of people involved. And you could have multiple disinformation folks. You could have multiple psyops going on.
Well, look, we've got 2 million
just
classified security clearances in the United States. If you ask me what they're doing, these are probably young kids, dumb idiots. If I want to be really serious, they're treasonous. And they do everything from infiltrate chat rooms all the way up to the faces we see on television every night. Mm-hmm. And
well, you're basically saying that there's those in the media that are a continuation of Operation Mockingbird.
Operation Mockingbird, which QAnon discussed, was an operation where the CIA had agents placed in all of our press. Now, this came out in the mid-1970s, and even Carl Bernstein of Woodward and Bernstein said, you guys wouldn't believe how controlled our media is. And this is the guy that broke Watergate. Operation Mockingbird, good operation to go look at.
Well, it's still continuing, is what.
Well, the official story is that they closed the program down, but they did not close the program down. They just said they did.
It's like watching Jason Bourne when they say, "Yeah, we closed that program," and
right.
Yeah.
Okay,
but I just want to be clear. Do you? Is there room in your thoughts to say that this could be disinformation? Also, Q. I mean, if we're just trying to play a devil's advocate, kind of a
great question. I've actually pondered that heavily, because every false flag, they're called psyops, psychological operations meant to fool the public. I mean, we are up against, I believe one of Satan's names is the author of confusion. He's the father of lies. He's the deceiver of not a few people on your block. He's the deceiver of the whole world. I'm not going to get into how deep this rabbit hole goes, but essentially any assumption you've ever had, question it. And I include everything from the shape of the world we live in, which I can't even prove it's round or flat, or if you're Neil deGrasse Tyson, he thinks it's pear-shaped. But it's probably somewhere in there. Assume nothing. Your entire belief system needs to, this is what happened with me, crumble. And then you can start to rebuild it piece by piece, provable piece by piece. And the picture that emerges is the one that was written about thousands of years ago in a series of scriptures that part of them are covered in the book called the Bible. There's a whole other bunch of them called the Apocrypha. Do not confuse these with the Gnostic books. It's counterfeit. The apocryphal books were actually part of the scriptures in Jesus' day. And these books were taken out of circulation by our friends in the Vatican at the Council of Nicaea in, I want to say, 432 A.D., give or take. The power in the world at that time. Romans, God said Rome would never be conquered. It was never conquered. It would go hidden for about 2,000 years, and it would show itself again after Israel's regathered. And if you don't think we have the same governmental system, we have the same republic type of governmental setup, we have the same architecture, and you can actually trace the lineage of our presidents, Europe's presidents, the royalty of the European Union. They come from the popes. And where did the popes come from? Well, the popes were the Caesars. They just won when Christianity was growing, because when Jesus Christ died, Satan had a problem. He could no longer rule overtly, because now all you had to do was believe that this man that died on a cross was the Son of God, and you have a ticket out of this prison planet, your soul can be saved. And you can follow the lineage of the Roman Caesars who became the popes, who then spread out to become the royalty of England. And that's why you've maybe heard rumors that all of our presidents, in one way or another, are related to the Pope or the Queen, blah, 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 blah. Those aren't conspiracy theories. That's information you can track down if you want to look into it. Okay. This is someone inside the White House. Now, here's a few things that have happened that prove that there's a source of information this guy has that it's either supernatural or it is at the highest level of information gathering capabilities that we have in our intelligence agencies. One was the Lord's Prayer. Now, we talked a little bit about this.
Yeah.
He, in one of his posts, put down the Lord's Prayer, and he used the Catholic version with some questions about, is this something that would ever change? Or along those lines, and please forgive us, we are still getting our hands around this, and there's 1,400 or so posts that he's made. I mean, each one deserves multiple hours of research. A few days later, the Pope announced that he wanted to change the Lord's Prayer. Thought that was interesting. Now, he may have good reasons to change it.
Yeah.
But that's not the point. The point is that he's at least was aware of things that were happening in the Vatican. On April 3rd, he said, our current Pope, who, by the way, remember we talked about pedophilia and child abuse, just some disgusting things. You can go look this up. Do you guys know that the Pope is wanted on child sexual trafficking charges in Chile and Argentina?
Yeah, I've heard this.
Yep.
I've actually seen the document. Now, well, why don't they go arrest him? What do you think? A Chilean police is just going to knock on the Vatican? Even if you're Interpol, you can't.
Right.
Well, it's got walls around it.
I mean, the Vatican has its own military for strike. Just
Yeah.
now, you understand Trump's problem? He can't just come out and go, well, I'm going to tell you who did 9/11 because he's only pulling out one tumor, whereas we got to pull them all out at the exact same time so that they can't feed off each other and grow back. Hence, I believe this is why QAnon keeps saying, have patience, you're going to be vindicated. And I also find it odd that completely apart from QAnon, I follow people that claim to be prophets of God. Okay? First of all, you got to believe there's God. I'm there. Now, does God have prophets anymore? Well, if he doesn't have prophets, why would Jesus give us a warning to not believe false prophets? It implies that there will be real prophets. Just something to ponder. There are 20 or so that I'm sure some of them are false. And, when they say something that's non-scriptural, easy to spot. They're all saying something very similar. And they started saying this before Trump was president. Some incredible predictions that the world could not have seen coming. One, that he would become president. I mean, how many prophets long before Trump was president announced this? Mark Taylor,
Yeah.
Kat Kerr. Do your own research on that. Another thing, one of the Prof. Kat Kerr, for instance, said something that I just thought would be impossible because these countries have technically been at war since 1950. North and South Korea would join to become one nation. That's actually, it's on the verge of happening.
Yeah, 6 months ago that would have been, I don't even know if it's that long, would have been
Right,
a
yeah.
ridiculous notion.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
3 months ago. No way.
Maybe
no
weeks.
Way. Yeah.
It would have been silly to even suggest something like that would even be worth considering.
It's been amazing. if you look at that situation right there, the Kim Jong-un situation, he's on a complete 180. And it was like at one point, he was going one way with nuclear testing. They were talking back and forth. Then all of a sudden, he did a complete 180. And I think that might have been around the time that Pompeo went over. And
One thing you guys got to understand, what do we know about North Korea? What our news tells us? So right there, assume nothing, go do your own research.
Well, I think they're
it's
a puppet. They're a pawn.
And actually, Q talks about North Korea, that you wouldn't believe who's really running that country. It is not who we think it is. it's no accident. I mean, who were America's enemies 10 years ago? Well, Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran, Syria, Libya, Egypt, Cuba, North Korea. Anyone know what all these countries have in common?
Banking system.
They did not have a Rothschild central bank as their currency system. 9/11 happens. One of the many, many fallouts of 9/11 is we start a ridiculous war where, again, our government gets caught lying. There were no weapons of mass destruction. And I'm not going to go into 9/11. I mean, that right now. We go in, Libya, Syria, Egypt, a bunch of nations flip, and now we're down to 3 nations that do not have a central banking system: Iran, Cuba, North Korea. Well, guess who I'm thinking we would have been at war with had Hillary Clinton been president? I'm guessing it would have been one of those 3 countries or all.
For sure, Iran, because she's quoted as saying that she would attack Iran if she was president.
And what these people do, like you'll find out during the Cold War, the bankers were sending money, American money, these international evil bankers, making sure communism continued to be propped up even though it was a bankrupt nation. And that is all over the public record. Can't get into that one now, but you guys can look it up for yourselves, and we address it in the 401 book, that's for sure. Very much like their MO throughout history. One of the things that Q enlightened me about. So Hillary Clinton, and if I get a couple terms wrong or percentage points wrong, forgive me. And again, I'm going to say do your own research. But apparently 20% of our uranium reserves were given to an enemy that literally wants to kill every American, all right? Iran hates the United States. This goes back to when the Shah was removed from power and in came Ayatollah Khomeini, and we had the hostage incident. 20%, she gave away 20% of our uranium reserves in exchange for donations to the Clinton Foundation. Now, if that can ever be proven, that alone, that's an executable, as in executed in public. We have killed people for less. Go look up Ethel Rosenberg and Julius, her husband, simply for giving secrets to the Russians. Now, the way these guys play it is they prop up both sides to keep them equal in power, roughly, because they want the conflict. And it's no accident that these are the same people that are behind military contractors. This is where they make their money. I mean, I have a feeling we're going to see the entire Clinton family behind bars in the next 18 months. And there will be a day when these 28,000 indict, there's going to be arrest day. It's coming soon. But I gave you guys a little teaser at the beginning of the show because one of those indictments was unsealed yesterday. Does that surprise anybody? It surprised the hell out of me. As I was prepping for the show and about to pack up and drive up here, there's an indictment.
Guess which one?
What?
Can I guess which one?
Guess.
Hillary's email indictment.
It is, the indictment is against Anthony Weiner. Yeah. This is Huma Abedin's husband. Now, if you think that his nefarious activity stops at sending pee-pee pictures to young girls, you have so underestimated what is really going on. I think he's getting a slap on the wrist for something he did by the former powers that be. Now, I actually saw the indictment today. Possible that it's completely fake. It sure as heck looked like it was the Oval Office and the presidential pen, and I know what an indictment looks like, and it was the United States against Anthony Weiner. Now, why was he indicted? Laptop. Thank you, Tony. What was on that laptop? Now, here's where, right now, all I can say is I have not been able to verify this particular fact, but QAnon said it. I'm starting to believe him. I'm going to throw it out there, let you guys figure this out. There was a file that was on Anthony Weiner's laptop, and the file was called Life Insurance. Okay? This laptop was confiscated by the New York police. 2 police officers, the first 2 police officers that viewed this file, oh, surprise, surprise, this was a month ago that this file was, came to light. Those 2 police officers, where are they now? Any guesses?
Dead.
Both dead. Not an accident. These things happen all the time. In fact, it was Jim Garrison in his closing argument, which is word for word what was in the movie JFK. He even said, how many car accidents and airplane accidents is it going to take before you guys figure out what the hell is going on? And it's one of my favorite Bill Cooper quotes is, when in the hell are all you people going to wake up? I'm at that point now.
Yeah.
I am not some conspiracy theorist walking around with my hat in my hand hoping to get the ear of a friend. Here's where I am. If you have turned your back on the truth, let's forget about what that might mean for your soul, because at the end of the day, Jesus Christ is the truth. His own words. He was not politically correct. Yes, he is love, but he's also justice. He called out liars in public. Does that sound like a nice, loving God? It sounds like a just God. He is truth. Where was I going with that?
Said if you turn your back on the truth.
Oh, thank you. You turn your back on the truth, you might be turning your back on God himself. Now, that's something personal that you need to deal with. But as a fellow American, my dad was a World War II Navy veteran. He was in flight training school when the war ended. Had we not dropped bombs on Japan, he would have been part of the invasion of Okinawa and ultimately Japan. Who knows? Maybe I wouldn't even be here. That generation understood what it was to fight for your country. And now when I see... I've lost a lot of respect for people I used to care about because they stick their head in the sand. And don't get me wrong, I love things like the Red Wings and Michigan football, and I'll do like serial Netflix from time to time. This is not all my life, but this is certainly the most important thing going on it. And for you to completely turn your back on that, I now consider you, in a sense, a deserter. And what happens to deserters in combat? Not good. Not good. And I'll tell you this. If we don't have enough courageous people in this country that are willing to stand up and do what I think Donald Trump's doing, to do what Jim Garrison did, to do what Bill Cooper did, we don't deserve the freedom we have. Freedom is not free. Do you understand how many people have shed blood over this? And the only thing you can be bothered with is, don't ruin my party this coming Friday night. Hey, dude, I love to have cocktails with the best of them. But not at the expense of ignoring what the hell is going on in the world. I don't want to turn this into a rant. Let's go back to Q. But I'm putting it out there. We already declared war in this show against these evil forces. In fact, one of our very first shows, we said Bushes, Rockefellers, Rothschilds, the world is waking up to you. Now, I never could have imagined that we would get the wind in our sails that we have by having a president who, inside information, hard to prove, but I do know this, for the first time in decades, every morning in the White House, they begin with a prayer to Jesus Christ. How funny is that? People inside of his circles say that Donald Trump became saved either right before or right after the election. Every prophet of God has been saying that the plans of this evil cabal are going to get flipped completely on their head. They all have the same message, and I can hear it in different languages: Spanish, German, English, and if you believe translators, this is a global thing that is happening. And they're all saying the same thing, very much the way God would do it, the way he did it with, remember Michael Criswell that we spoke about?
Yeah.
Flipping something out. You know the little story that happened in my life? Completely flipped on its head. And so it's funny that these prophets are out there saying, and they have no knowledge of politics or conspiracies. They're just Bible-reading believers that literally have been touched by something. Maybe they're BSing. But when you BS about the Lord's word, look, in the olden days, if a prophet ever made a single mistake, you know what happened to him?
Probably got executed.
They were executed. So when a prophet says, thus says the Lord, there can be no error. And if there is, they know if you make even one error, that's why the Bible has no errors in it. It predicted the future without a single error. And if you believe it has an error, you are simply having picked up something that you saw in a cartoon when you were young, or your teachers regurgitated to you, or maybe on television shows that was handed down and handed out. But it's not true, because that book is actually unbelievably accurate. 2,000 predictions of the future before they happen to a T. There's still 500 that have not happened, that all talk about essentially a 7-year period of time called Daniel's 70th week, which I don't believe has begun. Perhaps it has. You know, it's funny when you find out God is real and you essentially pledge allegiance to Jesus Christ and you know who he is, and he becomes I'm trying to come up with terms that don't sound cliche-y, Bible thumpery, or Christian-y, because I don't like those terms.
It's hard because the deck's been stacked, right? So you can't talk about this stuff without coming across.
I mean, there's a reason,
like a kook.
When you bring up words like Jesus, alien, or conspiracy, there's an automatic shutdown. Now, if this happens, you understand there's a level of brainwashing working inside of you. I guarantee you, there's a book. This book is within 50 feet of you right now. Everyone listening or that will ever listen to this, that book is within 50 feet of you. It's probably in every home in America.
It can be on your phone in
but here's
3
the
minutes
beauty.
or less.
It's in every home in America, but how many people actually really, really study it? Very few.
Very few.
I grew up Catholic by a woman that dragged me to church. I mean, one of the most devout, religious. Jesus was not religious. My mom is very religious. But she really can't tell me what's in that book. Yeah, she read it, 40, 50 years ago. And this is what is, to me, unbelievable. This book that claims to be written by the creator of the universe, it is one of the most famous books in history, yet most people I run into have this automatic reaction to discount it before ever looking into it. Understand, there's brainwashing at work. And where do we get all of our ideas and information? If this week, for instance, how many of you are trying to figure out if that voice says Yanni or Laurel? Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Mm-hmm. Remember the dress that was, do you see a blue dress or a yellow dress? Forget it.
Yeah, throwing me.
There's
sorry.
There's a couple like.
Forget it.
Yeah.
Bad alley. I'm backing the car up. We're continuing on. This book is under our noses, but no one knows what's in that book. It's like a box that's never been opened. I did not even consider it until I was about 1 year into. I now knew 9/11 was a total inside job, totally done by a very evil element that hold incredibly powerful positions within our government. I'm not going to say the government in general. And even Q says this. Most people are good, but almost everyone you see, now some of them, they're down. And when I say Satanist, I'm talking about the kind of people that literally sacrifice maybe some of those 800,000 missing children every year, put the fear of the devil in them. It produces a particular type of adrenaline, and when you drink that, it gives you a high. It's very addictive. Now, these are cold-hearted, loyal Satanists. Satan is a counterfeiter. God sacrificed his son so we would have a way to get to heaven, because he's running a holy organization up there. You can't just... A lot of people are expecting to just be yanked out of earth when you die and taken to heaven. If you've never asked to go or ever took time to learn about the owner of that house, you're going to be very shocked when you think he's just going to yank you out of the choice you made, which is to turn your back on him. He's a just God. If that were his kingdom, that would be a tyranny. In fact, there was a rebellion in heaven once, and he said, all right, if you don't want to be here, I'll make a place for you where all of my characteristics do not exist. That place is called hell. Even if you don't think it exists, do you really want to take a chance on your eternal soul? I mean, what if even if there's just a 0.00001% chance we're actually right about this? Do you guys understand how foolish it is to play with this kind of fire. We are all one breath away. A lot of people that won't bother looking into the Bible for their own soul will have insurance coverage on something that is much less likely to happen, like their house burning down. Just unbelievable sometimes. And I'm not saying this like from some position of authority, because for 43 years, that's who I was. That's why I think I understand these people, because I was them. I was the guy that took pride in having cocktails at the bar and talking about how ridiculous the Bible is with my other friends who were also having the same conversations, not knowing that we are just co-signing each other's bullshit. Thank God, literally, thank God for yanking me off of that. It has cost me friendships. But my soul has been saved. I'll tell you that. Or at least there's a good chance it will be if I don't F things up, which is always possible. Moving on. What are some things that Q has predicted? A couple terms to get familiar with here.
Can I interrupt 1 second? I know you were going on. When we're questioning about Q, this information you're talking about with Anthony Weiner, this is something that it's not like it's all of a sudden coming out, because it was out over probably a year and a half ago. Hagman's talked about it. This whole laptop, when they got the Weiner laptop, allegedly the whole story was that the New York Police Department took this over. They were furious over the things they found. I mean, furious or...
Well, do you know what it was they found?
Well,
I don't even know if I want to mention this on
allegedly
air.
They found, this insurance policy thing that you're talking about is allegedly has to do with kids and ritual murders and Hillary.
Well, the insurance policy are videotapes of the most heinous crimes you could imagine committed by some of the most famous people in the world. Now, remember where I was going with this. Satan's a counterfeiter. God sacrificed his son. Satan throughout history has required child sacrifice. I mean, you go back to the what were those statues that they'd heat up the hands, and people, in order to get power from Satan, would throw their children into these...
Well, they worship Moloch, which is...
Moloch, thank you.
The pagan god. So
that has not changed.
It has not changed.
There's a reason. Think about this. I right now live in a town of 10,000 people. There have been, let's call them unnatural child deaths in my lifetime. I know of about 8 or 9 of them. Okay? Hollywood probably has 10,000 household names. You name everyone in Hollywood, there's probably 10,000 people we've heard of over time. Do a little research on how many of them have lost a first son. It doesn't mean that they're down with evil necessarily, but it's statistically so significant and such an aberration that something is going on. You'll find the same thing in government too. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of these people have in fact done the unimaginable. And it is, as a father, unimaginable. And the only reason I know it exists is because I've talked to people that have been in these circles. I've talked to people that have been in these rituals. And God said it happened. And God said it would happen. He said in the last days the kings of the world would be gathering. How funny that the most powerful people in the world gather at places like Bohemian Grove, for instance. It is hard to talk about. And I'm still ready. I'm gonna do a brief overview of what I don't know what my advice is on this. I don't even know if this is something people should see.
Well, it's not easy to find. I couldn't find it just by simple searches. And again, whether it's real or not, who knows?
All right.
Who knows?
This is I'm not saying this is a fact, but you can find these things if you go onto the dark web, and I want to caution people.
Don't do it on your work computer.
Do not download these videos because you are watching the murder of a human being on camera. And what apparently was found on Anthony Weiner's computer was Huma Abedin and Hillary Clinton murdering a 12-year-old girl. And to amp up the horror of the moment, they cut off this girl's face while she's alive. They wore it, finished killing her, and drank her blood. And this is what is claimed to be the life insurance policy of Anthony Weiner, the first unsealed indictment, which don't count on your mainstream media covering it today. But the day when this avalanche is now in motion, and if we are looking at 28,000 indictments, and the number is multiplying at an exponential rate, and right now the rats are scurrying. Do you understand the level of tension going on in these evil circles? And it's not just that. I will say the most evil human being in the world, yes, Hitler was evil, but I'm talking about the money powers behind Hitler. They were the evil ones. These were the Rothschilds. In fact, there's a very strong case to be made that Hitler himself was a Rothschild. He was a bastard son of one of the Rothschild heirs. The most powerful man in the world, whose net worth would essentially be all the money in circulation on the planet, is estimated at $500 trillion. Richest man in the United States, Bill Gates, $60 billion. Many degrees below. Jacob Rothschild, well, here's what we know with certainty. Now, this happened, and I want to say this was November or December of November 17th, between November 13th and 17th. QAnon is now putting out the same types of threats that this evil cabal has given, certainly to me. I've gotten them before, where I get a phone call at night saying, it starts off nice. Dave, wow, what you're doing is really brave. But do you know the people that do what you do, sometimes they find their children are killed, and sometimes a knife gets stuck in you and it cuts you open. And I mean, he then goes on to describe some horrific, trying to scare me away from this.
Who is this?
I don't know.
Just someone contact you?
Many. I mean, I've had, not many, a handful.
Okay.
And they certainly go through with killing many people. Bill Cooper's an example. They can kill a president. They can kill a president. Something interesting that Q said, no way to verify this. Before Trump became president, intelligence services discovered that something had been put into the Oval Office, some sort of device that could literally kill him. And the room was swept, and all of these, whatever this technology is, was removed. And he's getting help from someone that knows absolutely exactly who we're up against. And these people, for once in their life, are actually running scared. November 13th, I'm trying to look for it here. You guys can look it up for yourselves. Q essentially threatens the cabal. And I think he was even talking to Linda Rothschild, if I'm not mistaken. But there again, do your own information. So. And he said, we know where you are. We know who you are. We know where you live. We can hear you breathing. And she spouted off something about, something or other. He replies with, just wait. 4 days later, I think something incredible happened. There was a helicopter, November 17th, that was taken down. It is believed that there was a collision. Now, there's no question about the fact that a helicopter on the Rothschild property crashed and 4 people died. That's a fact. That's on mainstream news. That they do not deny. The rumor inside of Q circles is that it was Jacob Rothschild himself, the most powerful man on the planet. Now think about this. This is a man that's in the news every single day up until November 17th of 2017. You can look him up. Wherever he goes, he's photographed. People know who he is. People in Q circles are saying that he's dead. That is inside of the circles we're in. That is what's being discussed. Now, you would think, just to put his own people's minds at ease, he'd show up to say, I'm okay. He has not been seen in the public eye since November 17th of 2017.
I did not know that.
Now, think about this. Think about this. If the most powerful man in the world can be gotten to, there's 28,000 indictments out there, and every day this number's growing. And you know you've been to some of these rituals with your friends, that your coworkers with, because these guys are all over our intelligence agencies. Look, one of my best friends is in the FBI. He's not, I mean, who knows a man's heart? He's a good man. I've known him forever. From the people that run these massive intelligence institutions, from their own mouths, they say that these networks exist. So you've got Joe Blow sitting in a cubicle somewhere, and police come in, take him. He leaves for 5 hours, and all of his coworkers, even the ones that were in with him, are wondering, is he giving up names? Is he talking about me? This is going on right now. This is not just in the United States. This is a global cancer. There's a reason Trump met with Putin. Now, this is another Q announcement, and this was the announcement to me. This is where my hope is. And that is, according to Q, they're very aware that the banking powers are where the real control of the world resides. And apparently, Trump is brokering deals with the Chinese and the Russians to declare that currency and that debt null and void, wiping out America's debt right now, which stands at about, what, $21 trillion, $65,000 per person. And again, if you want to understand how that can get ramped, it's not because we overspend. Go watch that video on the Federal Reserve. And I always said, no president can fix this because you have to replace the banking powers. And the minute you declare that debt illegal, much of which are investments by other nations, we're in World War III. But if you can get some of the most powerful nations to secretly say, hey, we're going to come up with our own gold-backed currency, all of a sudden, this is a game changer. Because now all of these rich billionaires, the currency they're sitting on, will be worthless because it's not backed by gold, so they can't go turn it in for gold anymore. That is why we need a currency that's backed by gold. And if that in fact is happening, that will change the history of the United States. This will essentially be a counterattack to the 1913 loss of our Revolutionary War. Now, if he pulls this off, there is hope for this world. Now, 9/11 Truth Community. Don't ask me why I believe this, or know it, or think it. The people that were behind 9/11 are in those 28,000 indictments. These are household names. And I suspect that the world is going to know the truth, and very soon. And with that also will come the truth of the spiritual war that we've been in. There's so much more to talk about. What do we have, Howard? Like a minute? Let me throw this.
Let me ask you a question. Did you watch this video yourself?
Did you see this video? I don't even want to comment on that.
Oh, I would recommend that nobody searches for that video.
I'll tell you this: when I
look
for it, my computer started doing some very strange things.
Yeah, don't.
I'll say this: something that I loved hearing from these prophets of God. All had the same thing to say, and they said God is going to turn that Satan's plans on its head. You find out who the children of iniquity are. That's in the Bible. Find out what the mystery of iniquity is. Now, for you people that are really awake, you understand that right now, just like there was in Nazi Germany, and we are now dealing with the grandchildren of the Nazis. The Nazis did not lose the war. Germany did. We brought the Nazis over here. We're now 2 generations into them. The death camps are built. They're called FEMA camps. There's a few hundred of them across the United States. I've seen these with my own eyes. There's video. Easy to verify. I found it very interesting. These prophets of God said these camps, which were originally meant for Christians, will actually be filled with the very members that we're going to try and push the population into them. The social media networks and platforms that they built through puppets like Mark Zuckerberg, originally built to monitor every movement we make, are being used to communicate this truth. This is how God works. He will turn this evil plan on its head. And we are getting a point to this country where it is time to get off the fence. You are either a white hat or a black hat. Go do some digging to figure out what that term is. If you care about your soul, you want to be one of the white hats. You don't want to get trapped here, and you don't want to be associated with this kind of evil. And if you're still breathing, even if you've committed the most heinous crimes, you can still get out of it. And I know there are people at Langley, Virginia, listening in right now. Young man or young lady or whoever you are, do some soul searching and think about what you're really involved in. This is more than just a paycheck. At the end of the day, does anyone disagree with the fact that in the near future, whether it's a year or 20 years, that Jesus Christ is in fact the Messiah and coming back? Does anyone have any doubt about this?
Zero.
None.
Zero.
Zero doubt.
I will die for this fact. And the Bible said many of us will be tested. Ignorance, Jesus also said, if you're lukewarm, you may as well shit on him. He doesn't want you. He wants people that wants him. My advice is, if you care about your soul and your family, check into it. And if you also care about your family, arm yourselves and get some food for about 6 months. Because there's a couple plays these evil cabal could do that'll make 9/11 look really small. And who knows how this is going to play out. They are to be reckoned with. But God is much stronger than they are. At the end of the day, I do believe Jesus is coming back, and soon. And I just hope you guys make the right choice and can figure that out before it's too late. We've done a lot of talking on this show. Any last points anyone wants to bring up?
No, I think I'm good.
To be continued.
Yeah. We're going to continue on with this. We're going to cover this for several weeks, and I think this is going to become a national news story before you know it. So with that, praise Lord Jesus Christ.
Amen.
Amen. Have a good week, and we'll catch you guys next week.